right. Welcome to the Her Success podcast, Stories of Female Leaders in Franchising. I'm Cassidy Ford, and I have Tanishia Beacham with me today. Tanisha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm very excited.
So Tanisha is here. She serves, I'm gonna read this off because it's a lot. Tanisha serves as Senior Vice President of Franchise Operations and Operating Systems for Sonic America's Drive-In, part of the Inspire Brands family of restaurants. Inspire is a multi-brand restaurant company whose portfolio includes more than 32,000 Arby's, Baskin-Robbins, Buffalo Wild Wings, Dunkin', Jimmy John's, Rusty Taco, and Sonic locations in over 65 countries. Tanisha serves on the boards for the Boys and Girls Club of Oklahoma County and the Girl Scouts of Western Oklahoma. She previously served on the board of the Oklahoma City Arts Council. She was recognized as a Journal Record 40 Achievers Under 40 in 2015 and is a member of the leadership of Oklahoma City Class 33. Tanisha holds a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism from Georgia State University, and she currently resides in Oklahoma City. So we're really glad to have you on the show today, Tanisha. I think we're going to have an awesome conversation.
Yes, I can't wait. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about where you got started. Let's just dive in.
So as you heard, I was originally in Atlanta, so went to college there at Georgia State. And it's interesting because I was a journalism major, had no designs on being in corporate America or, leading operations. That would have, if you would have told me that, over 20 years ago, I'd have been like, I think that's the wrong person. But being in Atlanta, after I graduated college, I knew that there was something different that I wanted to do. So I started working in advertising, actually, at a small shop in downtown Atlanta, and really, really enjoyed the advertising world. And I was an account coordinator and working with teams that helped franchisees. And so the co-op marketing business was something that was super interesting to me. And so I continued along that path and ended up moving on to another agency working at the Maroc and Associates on the McDonald's account in Atlanta and Augusta, again, working directly with franchisees. And then Sonic called. And in 2001, came over to the Sonic side, again on the marketing side, but supporting franchisees, and had the Mississippi and Louisiana territories. And the rest is kind of Sonic history, if you will, for me, at the very least. Had a great opportunity to help support franchisees in those areas. And then wanted to continue to grow and develop with the company. Became a regional marketing director a few years later, moved over to the Houston market, and had South Texas as a territory, along with that swath of the Southeast area of the country. And a few years after that, an opportunity came where we were making some structure changes. And they said, hey, you're a regional marketing director. You've been working with franchisees for a long time. You've been sitting in on business reviews. How would you like to be a regional vice president? And at first I was flattered and excited. And then I started thinking about it and I was like, oh, but I'm not an operator. How am I going to help coach these franchisees that I've been talking about marketing systems and local store marketing and media budgets, and start talking to them about their P&L? And where's the credibility going to come from? So it had a lot of self-doubt, but knew I was smart enough to get it. Partnered with my team of business consultants, and those gentlemen had over 25 years of experience each in the restaurant industry. So then I partnered with them. And, one of the things that I learned from that experience is you can always teach someone and you can always learn and grow. And even though they had been in the industry for a long period of time, I brought different things to the table, and still have very strong relationships with because they're still on my team in down there in the Southeast. So after that, I was, cut my teeth as a regional vice president of the Mid-South region, and then ended up getting recruited to corporate in 2012 to lead the field marketing group at that time. So went to operations, came back to marketing, and during that period of time was trying to figure out, hey, what do I want to be when I grow up? What does my career path look like? And ended up focusing in on the franchise side of the business and wanting to be a franchise operations leader, and started kind of veering more that direction. And a few years later, started running one half of the country. A couple of years after that, took over the entire country, and was promoted to senior vice president of franchise operations with the entire field team reporting under me. And just about almost 10 months ago, also incorporated operation services and training into my purview as well. So now I have franchise operations with the field team that's dedicated to the franchisees, operation services that builds standards and operations capacity from an execution standpoint, and then also training from that standpoint. So that is kind of my 20 years in a nutshell.
That's summing it up pretty well. It's a lot to sum up. But in that, you bring up so many important things that stand out to me. The flexibility that you had in being open to taking the call to go to Sonic, being open to learning and growing. Something that I've faced is tackling that challenge of earning that credibility, coming to the table and owning and having agency, right? So talk to me a little bit more about some of those lessons that you mentioned that you learned. How did you start to own yourself in that process?
That's a great nugget there. The flexibility being specific. I do know for a fact that there are people smarter than me. There are people with more experience in different ways, kind of earlier in my career, but they weren't willing to take that step, right? So I was always willing to make the move. I moved from Atlanta, Georgia to Jackson, Mississippi. I thought I'd be there for a couple years, then move back to Atlanta and, start my career continuing on the marketing and advertising world. However, that did not happen. And so being flexible to be able to take a look at an opportunity, see it what it's for, what it can challenge you with as a person and a professional. So being flexible is extremely, extremely important, and one of my biggest life lessons when I look back at my career and the opportunities that I've had. The other piece is answering that phone call, being willing to have that conversation. When I was in Atlanta, I was about to be promoted to the next level. I loved my clients. I loved my agency, and I thought it was great. And I was on a great trajectory. I could have very easily ignored that phone call or said, hey, you know what? It sounds like a cool opportunity, but I'm not willing to move, again, with the flexibility. But being flexible and adaptable to a potential opportunity will continue to lead you to more opportunities. So always have that conversation is something that I learned very, very early, because that one phone call, returning that one phone call changed the entire trajectory of my career and my life. So I'm a very big advocate for, hey, just answer the phone and return the call. You mentioned as well the, self-doubt and can I do this? Sometimes people see things in you that you don't see in yourself. So, rise to that occasion. If there are some self-doubts, for me, what I've noticed was it's like, hey, you know what? What are all these folks that have been operators their whole lives, their whole careers, going to learn from me? And what I learned was that I bring something different to the table. It's not about teaching them or telling them what they should be doing, but being inquisitive, asking the questions and seeking to understand versus, direction. So I learned a lot with that approach during my regional vice president days. And I will say that was some of the hardest work for me to do professionally with my professional growth and development. But it was the most rewarding part of my career path because it did flex so many different muscles. It made me think a lot differently about how I would approach a situation. And it also taught me that you do not have to know everything. You do not have to be the subject matter experts. You build a team around you that you can tap to be able to do those things, and that will help grow you. Previous to that, I was like, I had to know everything. I knew every dollar, budget, GRP, marketing plan, digital, all of that. Just off the top of my head. And I thought that made me good. But what makes you great is knowing who you can go to and being okay with, I don't know that, but I know who does. Let me get back to you. Those are totally fine words to say. And a lot of times, especially younger in your career, you feel like you have to know all the information, and you don't.
That's one of those things that's one of the hardest things that you probably have to do in life is to work hard at that self-awareness and kind of that humility to just to say, I don't have all the answers, and to ask for help.
Absolutely. I agree. Because there's a lot of comfort that you get from knowing all the answers. And as soon as you step out of that, it's like, you know what? I have no idea. The sooner you get comfortable with saying, you know what, let me get back to you. I'm not sure, but let me follow up. Those are great words. And especially with franchisees, right? Because, franchisees are amazing, very creative entrepreneurs, and they can come up with exciting and bright ideas. But being on the franchisor side, you have to hear that and temper that enthusiasm just a little bit, because sometimes ideas can be a little bit out there. We usually need to channel them into a process, right? But when you say yes in the excitement of the moment, they're like, okay, it's going to happen. Versus, that's interesting. Let me follow up on that, right? That gives you a little bit of space and some time in order to vet some of the great ideas that, and all the best ideas do come from the field. I 100% believe that. Our franchisees are creative and very, very spirit-filled and come up with some great things. So managing that is one of my favorite things.
No, you mentioned not just now when you're talking about listening to the franchisees, you're listening to yourself, you're listening to the people around you. At what point did you know enough about yourself or make the decision that you were going to choose a path, that you had a goal and you were going to go for that, and you felt like you had that confidence to do that?
Interestingly enough, the role of Vice President of Field Marketing was one that I knew I wanted. And I knew, even though I was on the franchise operations side at the time, I knew I could do it. And I was very excited about the opportunity. And so it was one of those things where I had grown enough confidence in that previous role to not have any hesitation about moving that forward. And I do feel like, challenging myself for those previous 2 years on the operations side, getting to know that end of the business, diving into P&Ls and operational standards, and, having those conversations, which were very different than media budgets and fun, flashy marketing campaigns, it prepared me to be able to have the confidence that I needed in order to move forward in a corporate office-based role, running an entire team for the brand. So I do think that, stepping outside of that comfort zone, knowing that you can do it and being successful in that does help you feel like you can do other different things or things that were more familiar, but at a higher level.
Even sitting in that, even gaining that confidence with the experiences that you had out in the field and moving into this corporate role, we talked a little bit about still having imposter syndrome, right?
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, when you're in the field, you have the direct relationship with franchisees, and your corporate support center is just that, right? They're the support center. You tap into your resources there in order to fulfill the needs that you have at the local market level. When you come into and I had never, at that point, I'd been with Sonic for 10 years almost. And I had never worked in the corporate office. And I had not been in a quote corporate environment because I worked at agencies before that. And agencies are a little bit more low key, less, corporate mentality, just a lot looser, right? So I came into the office as a vice president, and we would be in senior leadership meetings, and when do I speak? Like, should I just offer up my opinion? I'm just going to hang back and see if I'm asked, and then I'll respond, right? Mm-hmm. That's not what you're paid for. You're paid and you're brought in and you have a seat at that table to be a part of the conversation. And it took me a few months to kind of figure that out. And it was great because I did have some leaders and mentors that saw that I was maybe a little tentative and was like, hey, you know what? This is absolutely appropriate for you to speak on. It's like, well, it's really not my team that's impacted. So, I'm there to support. Well, but still, you're part of the leadership team. You absolutely have the right to have that conversation in the big group. Because another thing with how we work with franchisees is you never want to catch anyone off guard or by surprise. So I'm not a person that will roll into a meeting and just, throw something up there to expect alignment on without having had preliminary conversations. And I was always so concerned about my peers or other departmental leaders thinking that I was, catching them off guard without having a previous conversation. You don't meetings are to work it out, right? You don't necessarily have the time or the opportunity to discuss the pre-read before you go into the meeting. The meeting serves as the alignment. So I wanted to make sure that I was not offending anyone by speaking, telling what my true opinion was. So I got over that really quickly though, because a lot of it was like, well, why am I here? Am I supposed to be here? Am I qualified enough to be here? And even being the most qualified person in the room, you still have those doubts and working through that. And I had a great opportunity with having an executive coach about talking about, hey, you know what? You were brought here for a reason. And so let's talk about how we overcome some of these, internal mental struggles that you're having so that imposter syndrome, you can let that, be behind you. And that was some of the best work I ever did on my professional development, understanding what my role was, that I did play a part and I did have a responsibility as a leader to share my thoughts and opinions. And it wasn't about, throwing anyone under the bus or them not being adequately prepared with what my comments might be. It's just, hey, you know what? That's how it works. And you deserve to be here.
That resonates so much with me. And I think probably with so many women that are tuning in, because I know that a lot of us have something to say. We have something good to say. We are there for a reason. Mm-hmm. We have been selected for a reason, and we wouldn't be there if there wasn't a purpose for us to be there. And we have to remember that sometimes, because those mind games start to kick in.
Absolutely. I think about a time, it's years ago now, but being in the office and two male executives had been featured in two different articles and recognized, and they brought it in. And they were like, hey, look how great this is for the brand. Well, there were two other female executives who got honored with some extremely high accolades here locally. And it was, we had to find out about it. And it's like, wait a minute, that happened 3 weeks ago. Why didn't you? Oh, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's just like we at times can mute ourselves and not celebrate the fact that your success also equals the brand success. It's not self-promotion. It was, you were recognized by an esteemed group of your peers, and that's something to celebrate. And it's great for you, and it's great for the brand. Being okay with, talking about how great that was. It just was so interesting that within a matter of weeks, those things happened. And the way that the male executives talked about themselves versus the way the females just kind of, didn't even mention anything. We had to find out almost accidentally, was just a very interesting observation for me as a young professional.
How have you taken those scenarios, just like the one you just described? How have you taken what you've learned from that and kind of given back to some of the other women in your organization and taught them that they don't need to keep quiet about those things? They need to, they're not self-promoting. Maybe they are tooting their own horn, but they should, right? What kind of conversations do you have with your team about that?
Well, I'm a very big advocate for mentorship, and it can be a formalized process or just having that hallway conversation with someone that you see maybe having a rough time or you've heard is having a rough time, but making sure that with female leaders and folks that are growing up through the organization are very well aware, if you don't talk about the great things that you're doing, nobody else will. So it's not self-promotion. It is making sure that you are continuing to elevate yourself in your role, but also letting leadership know that you're interested in growth and development, and these things are important to you. And don't ever mute yourself. Don't ever, pull yourself back because you think it might look a certain way. Always fly that flag and be proud of everything that you do. And no matter how, potentially small or large you may think it is, it's important. And so make sure that you're talking about those things and don't be afraid. So I really hope that continued growth from a professional standpoint with females in the industry and outside, that you are totally where you're supposed to be, and be very excited about that. And don't be afraid to talk about your achievements. And, that's something that I do even when we talk to interns, having that conversation with extremely, early in their career folks is important, because had I known that earlier, I would have maybe started shifting my thinking a bit earlier, right? And I think it just helps with future growth and development from a professional standpoint, and in your personal life too. If you are very passionate about different charities and organizations, hey, talking about your ability to serve on nonprofit boards and things like that, if that's something that you're passionate about, put yourself out there, push yourself forward.
When you're talking about things like serving on boards for charities and things like that, I'm not assuming that this is the case, but I'm wondering what has been the most rewarding part of your career to this point?
I would say the most rewarding part of my career to this point is really seeing other people grow and seeing what paths those have led to. Even if they're no longer with the company, but seeing people soar to new heights and approaching new and different opportunities and being extremely successful. That's always been something that I have been very passionate about, like giving people the same opportunities that I was given. I am not, when you look on paper, I would not be the senior vice president of franchise operations and operating systems, or however long the title is at this point. But I was given opportunities that allowed me to flex different muscles because people trusted and believed in me, my skills, and my capabilities. And I love offering that to others. And, I give back by offering mentorship and just being that shoulder sometimes. Again, it does not have to be a formalized mentor, a mentee process, but I still have a very good former colleague that has moved on to a completely different business and is working in nonprofit out in California, who still taps me to, hey, will you review this presentation? Or, do you think my thinking lines up? And, any feedback. And that feels great to know, like, I have no idea what she's talking about. Right. But she trusts me enough to, tap me to help her formalize and formulate her thoughts on presentations and things like that. So I definitely feel that making sure that you are giving back in a way that is valuable to you, be it, through nonprofit board work is good. But like my personal biggest accomplishments is, helping other people grow.
I feel the same way about the things that I was able to do with my franchisees, when I was on the franchisor side of things. And you mentioned something about what the things that you had learned, that not from a mentorship perspective, that the things that you had learned about what drives franchisees and what motivates franchisees. And that wasn't something that you learned overnight, right?
Right. Well, it's going to be something that takes a lot of time, and every person works differently, right? So investing the time to get to know your franchisees is extremely important. One thing or a few things are going to be pretty consistent. What's it mean to the bottom line? How much is it going to cost them? And what's the return, right? So that when you talk to franchisees, or in my experience, speaking to franchisees and working with them, they, again, entrepreneurs, very, very creative spirits. A lot of our franchisees, started as employees in a drive-in, like on the grill, and they saw someone else being able to do it, and it's like, hey, I want to own one of these, and now they own 40 or 150, right? So the financial aspect is always going to be important to a franchisee, but also the franchisees are very, very passionate about their local market, their team members, and providing opportunities for the next one, especially in our brand, because so many of them it was kind of a pay it forward standpoint. Like, hey, I've got this guy over here who wants to be a franchisee. I want to help him get there. So, a lot of that is what makes our franchisees tick, providing that next opportunity to the next general manager who is going to be a multi-unit franchisee one day. And our franchisees do give back so much to their fellow franchisees in the form of mentorship and conversation and those types of things. But also, understanding what is going to make that franchisee more successful. So helping them, see maybe some gaps in their business that they weren't ready to see, or they didn't quite see. It's like, hey, you know what? You're at the standpoint right now where you might need another supervisor, or, there might be an opportunity for you to look at organizing your teams differently based on your geography spread now. Because sometimes, especially with growth, franchisees just continue to do what they were doing, and at times don't just have the time to take that step back and see, okay, how is this going to work with that. So just bringing things to their attention without being, preachy, if for lack of a better term, and just having the conversation and being very open. We have great relationships with our franchisees. We have amazing franchisees. So that's the best part of my job. I love working with franchisees and my team members as well. So, just making sure that you understand their point of view as you're having those conversations, even contentious conversations, right? Understanding the other person's point of view is always important, especially for a franchisee, because they're their own boss, right? So, it's like we don't want to have an us versus them mentality. We partner very well with our franchisees, but we're still the franchisor and they're the franchisee. And so sometimes those, tough conversations do have to happen, but when you understand the other person's point of view, and you listen, that is imperative.
That is a really great point to make about you have to listen, you have to understand that point of view. And that's a challenge, right? And I'm wondering, another challenge, what would you say is kind of the biggest challenge that you've faced as a leader relating to your franchisees or just getting to the place where you are now in a mentorship capacity? What would you say that is?
That's a great question. Probably the biggest challenge would it be, when you get to a certain place in your career, you have access to a lot more information. And when you're a leader, you can't necessarily, you are not allowed the freedom to be able to have open dialogue at all times. There's a process, right? Mm-hmm. So, especially when there are things like transitions or integrations and things like that, those things take time, and your team may not understand why things happen at a certain time or why things are happening, and they feel like they're happening to them. But having to be able to bring people along and talk to them about, hey, you know what, when we move, we're in the messy middles right now, and when we get through this, we'll be on a much better path. It's difficult to get people to understand when you're going through that, when you see the full picture and they're only seeing this much of the picture, right? So I do think that is, as somebody who is super transparent, likes to keep open lines of communication with their teams. That is one of the challenges that I see is, making sure that you are continuing to live in that truth and who you are in your own personal brand, while making sure that you're bringing your team along in the appropriate way, right? So those are, some minor challenges and hiccups. I say, like, the best thing about managing people is managing people and growth and development. And the worst thing about managing people is managing people, right?
Yeah.
Because they're all different. Everyone, has a different personality and likes different type of communication and engagement. So balancing all of that is always a little bit of a challenge, but it all is worth it in the end. So
messy middles. I'm going to have to remember that. That's a classic right there. I like that. It is almost time for us to wrap up. I'm wondering what your last piece of advice would be to someone out there who is wanting to grow their career and be where you are right now.
Biggest piece of advice: answer the phone and be flexible. Don't lock yourself down by thinking, oh, that would require a move out of my hometown or the city that I love, because it could lead to great opportunities and things that you never dreamt for yourself. At the same time, hey, even if it doesn't work out, you had a little bit of an adventure and you tried it, and you can't ever say woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? You took the step and you chose the opportunity for yourself and your own growth. So yeah, definitely continue to be flexible and answer those phone calls, and see what that could lead to as far as a next step is concerned, because you never know.
You never know. Exactly. Fantastic. Well, Tanisha, thank you so much for joining today. I feel like this has been a really great conversation about some things that we haven't really heard before in some ways. And it's great to hear your story and have you share it with us today.
Well, thank you so much. It was such an honor to be here. I'm so happy to share, and really, really appreciate the opportunity. It was great. You're awesome, Cassidy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll see you later.
All right.